I'm Teresa Coraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. Today I'm back from a lovely weekend in Atascadero with my 3 daughters for my 66th birthday. And the tattoo of the hamsa is thanks to my oldest daughter, which I'll be attaching one of my early YouTube videos that talks about the significance of the open palm hamsa to ward off the evil eye. Ever since one of the viewers on JJ Cooey's video said, "Don't mess with the woo-woo woman," I am claiming that with great enthusiasm. And I want to say that I think we need more woo-woo. There needs to be more of a sense of spirituality, because with all of the dark things that I've been talking about lately, I've had several viewers say, I need to go take a walk. I need to go start meditating and doing something to balance it out. So I say that understanding the truth in the world and looking and questioning the truth of the world are 2 feet of the same body. You have to keep alternating right and left, otherwise you just go in circles. Today I'm going to be elaborating on and summarizing a really fun interview with Mathew Crawford, and he interviewed me on his Rounding the Earth podcast. This was something that was wide-ranging, but he gave me my choice of the topic, and I picked, what do I want from a president? This started with geoengineering and the duodecimal system. We got into different systems of decentralization and how you can do that economically between Bitcoin and my carrot system. We talked about the lack of trust within the resistance movement and why that is. We looked at things like the feminine and masculine models and styles and how that impacts everything. So this sparked so many ideas that I wanted to follow up on. So on the Substack version, I have linked the original interview, which I can't put on YouTube. And I also have links to all of the different things that I'm going to be adding here. So please check that out at Substack Third Paradigm. Mathew and I started by talking about the mundane topics of the weather and the scenery, but those topics are never mundane at Third Paradigm. So that led into geoengineering and the last episode that I did. But since then, I've been able to look at a site that Teresa Whiteley sent me to called the Weather Modification History. And what that showed was fascinating, where atmospheric river is actually a term. It's not just what they're calling all of these events and all of the rain that we've had in Santa Cruz, that it actually is something that is guided with antennas that move that atmospheric river where they want it to go and when they want it to rain. So those conspiracy theories, they just don't stay theories for long. Also, Georgie and Donnie, which is another Substack that is written by Joe, did a summary of Tessalina's post, which was on Nikki Florio's post on geoengineering. So that's another link that you should check out. And then Mathew asked me about my town that I'm in, which is Santa Cruz, a place that he has fond memories of. It's one of his favorite places that he, I believe, taught for a year here at the university. And I told him he should come back and visit before the entire place gets ruined, because they have quotas. Our World Economic Forum governor, Gavin Newsom, has set quotas for every California city to have to cram in more high-density housing. And in my neighborhood, they have authorized something that is a 5-story building with 3,000 square feet of commercial space on the bottom, not the usual setbacks, and not enough parking. And they're able to get away with this by something called the builder's remedy, which should be called the developer's wet dream, because it allows them to bypass all of the ordinary requirements and put something in that is going to have 52 units. And what it's replacing is this cute little hippie store that is a landmark called Food Bin, that has the herb room and 2 little neighborhood hubs where people can go and get some groceries. It's been the most adorable thing that makes us feel like we're a real neighborhood, but not for long. And then we went into the topic of what do I want from a president? And I think my answer will please my anarchist viewers, that what I want is for a president to decentralize into 12 different regions and then get out of the way, with their only job being to protect the sovereignty of those 12 regions. So then we went into why 12, and I started talking about how I think that 12 is a number that we should have our numbering system based on. That base 12 makes so much more sense because it's divisible by 3 different primes. And Matthew, being the math kid, that he said, oh yeah, I had somebody else who was really into the duodecimal system, and I didn't know that there was a word for it. Since Matthew gave me that much cooler name, duodecimal system, which is much better than the dozenal system I'd heard before, I was able to look it up and find that my suspicions were true. There are other cultures that knew that that made so much more sense, that this idea that our ancestors were so stupid that they could only count using their fingers and toes, that is such a dumbing down of people who were using much more of their brains than we do, because they were needing to actually remember things. They had to memorize, and so they had the capacity to be able to do that, something that we've lost. And they did all kinds of math in their head. These are astronomers, people. So that is something that I've linked to in the Substack, and it made me also think about other things that I would change if I was Tsarina of my own fiefdom in my own little system here. And another thing I'd change is the QWERTY keyboard. So keyboards were initially for typewriters, and they were designed so that the keys wouldn't hit at the same time and jam. Now we don't have that problem. So there are a couple of different options so that 70 to 74% of the typing that you do is all going to be on the home keys. And then another thing that I would change is the calendar. That I've heard that the calendar can be represented on the back of a turtle. That a turtle has the 13 different spaces for the 13 lunar months in a year, and then has 28 in between if you include the tail and the head as one. So 13 months of 28 days with one bonus day that's not even part of that calendar. That is something that had been adopted by native tribes for millennia, and that we have made this weird calendar instead. All of these are legacy systems that have the only downside that you already have something that you're going to have to fit to, but that something you're fitting to is generally something that serves commercial interest, and that if we were designing it ourselves, I think that we could have a generation that grew up with an easier way to do things. Then we got in how to decentralize. And Matthew and I had a 3-hour conversation on Thursday before our interview. So at that time, we talked quite a bit about my carrot system from my book, How to Dismantle an Empire, versus Bitcoin, which is something he is a big proponent of. And I thought about it later and thought that we're answering, I think, two different questions. The question that he's answering is, how do we protect our saved labor and our assets during this transition? And I think Bitcoin could be a good answer for that. But the question I'm asking is, how do we make this transition possible for everyone through communities without leapfrogging over from one system to all the people, and that instead have something that goes through layers? So that's where I was again able to take advantage of Matthew's math whiz capabilities and asked him about 12 to the 8th power, which he had an almost immediate answer for. So that gets us, if you have a division into 12 regions, and then each one divides into, say, 12 republics, and then they divide into 12 commonwealths of around 100 to 300,000 people, and then those divide into 12 districts, which divide into 12, shires, villages, and then neighborhoods, that you end up having what he calls Dunbar circles, something that can create the same sense of, I can know these people, I can trust people because I'm dealing with them face to face, and I'm dealing with people who know those people. So there's always accountability. So that's what I look at as a way of being able to replace a top-down hierarchical system with something that is bottom-up, that you can call anarchy or community self-governance or small-scale sovereignty or federalism in the original sense of the word. Matthew said that he and his wife have batted around two different dreams for if they were ever able to actually retire. And one of them is to be part of this kind of small community where maybe there's a stage in the middle of town and people can come and play music when they want to, and that there is a convivial sense of give and take and partnership in developing the policies of that town. And his other would be traveling around for 1 to 3 years at a time and being able to work directly with people and teach them how to start successful businesses. I told Matthew that both of his dreams are possible with my system and more, that I look at us needing at least 5 or 6 different kinds of economy for the kinds of functions that we're trying to incent. In the first, most basic level, I think we need a subsistence economy around food production, that food production and access to shared land is something I think we should all be involved in. We all need to eat 2-3 times a day. Personally, I like having Hobbit 4th breakfast. So food is something we need to take seriously and all participate in. Then the bulk of my system, the carrot system, is looking at a system of reciprocity so that we can provide goods and services to each other. Now, I didn't have Matthew do the calculations, but I talk about how if we take the mortgages back from the private bankers and stop allowing them to issue the money by issuing credit on the houses, if we take that away from them and reserve it for our Commonwealth banks, and then we issue dividends to people who can use it in 4 different ways under my system. One is for food, locally produced. 2 is for something I call well care, that includes child care, elder care, homeopathy, anything that helps us make our lives better. And then the 3rd is education. And that's something that anyone can teach and anyone can learn. And then the 4th is home improvement. If you have a community of 10,000 people and you're issuing dividends in each of those 4 categories of 100 to 200 carats each every month for every one of those different functions, what that's going to give you is 1 to 2 million carats, equal to at least that much in dollars, if not worth twice that, if you're looking at exchange rates and taxation and making sure that you're favoring local goods and production. That ends up circulating at least once and then continues to circulate. So you can keep adding to the amount that's going to be fostering your local production with every month that you can keep those carats in circulation. But we also talked about education, which he says in its current state is the best slave contest, and I completely agree. So if we were to redo that, I have an episode I'll link in the Substack that is called Reinventing Education. And with my recent travel and the fact that I've now put my Cumberland childhood home up as an Airbnb called the Art House, that I think that we could be doing something different, that we could be having people who host someone from somewhere else be able to get edu-travel vouchers, things that you can use for other peer-to-peer car rentals or space rentals, and that all of these things like Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, those all should be controlled by the community. That rather than having some corporation for the sake of a little bit of programming end up owning all of the profit of that, that profit should always be going back to the community, and that it should be a network, not a hierarchy. Someone in the chat then brought up, I think it's Derek Bros and the Greater Reset, and whether my plan was similar to that. I talked about how in order to do that, you have to have an extremely wealthy person who first buys all of that land from the banks. And then when there's an exchange, because people can't live on services alone, and we are our services labor force, you have to provide the money so that then they can get the products that they need from outside. I think this is going to take a generation for us to be able to up our tolerance for manual labor, that there's more manual labor involved in our lives than we really acknowledge. So we're going to need to learn skills, and we're going to need to learn as much as we can while we're still dependent on those kinds of trade systems, and hopefully have the advantage of that so that we have a chance to make the transition. My carrot system is based off Ellen Brown's public banking model. That's the first step. And Mathew had some very interesting information about how community banks were intentionally taken down by 2006 when they were forced to swallow these toxic bonds that were essentially bombs that then went off in 2008. And this information is, I think, at 1 hour and 16 minutes into the original video. Ellen Brown has posted a very interesting article on how the war on crypto triggered a banking crisis. And let me read you some excerpts that I have posted on Substack. In a February 2023 article on Pirate Wires, titled Operation Choke Point 2.0, Nick Carter laid out the case that the federal government was quietly attempting to ban crypto. In a 7,000-word March 23rd follow-up titled, Did the Government Start a Financial Crisis in an Attempt to Destroy Crypto?, he writes, the two most crypto-focused banks, Silvergate and Signature, were forced into liquidation and receivership, respectively. The established narrative is that they made bad bets and lost, or that they couldn't handle flighty depositors in the form of tech and crypto startups. But there's an alternative version of events being pieced together that is far more sinister. The preponderance of public evidence suggests that Silvergate and Signature didn't commit suicide, they were executed. In January 2023, some in the crypto space noticed highly coordinated activity between the White House, financial regulators, and the Fed, aimed at dissuading banks from dealing with crypto clients, making it far more difficult for the industry to cooperate. This is problematic because it represented an attempted seizure of power far beyond what is normally reserved for the executive branch. On Sunday, the 12th of March, Signature was abruptly sent into FDIC receivership by the New York State Department of Financial Services. This was not a two-bit crypto bank. They had $110 billion in deposits as of 2022, of which around 20% came from crypto-focused companies. Almost immediately, we knew something was wrong. Signature was not a crypto bank like Silvergate, where the majority of deposits were derived from crypto firms. It was a pretty venerable New York bank that primarily serviced real estate. It was not in as bleak a financial position as Silvergate or SVB, or other beleaguered regional banks. They weren't closed on a Friday afternoon after market close, as is typical in receivership situations, but snuck in on a Sunday night, practically a footnote to the Silicon Valley Bank shutdown. The FDIC was reportedly surprised on Sunday when Signature was delivered into their hands. The New York Department of Financial Services has maintained a well-known, long-running animus against crypto. The bank crisis was the perfect cover to take down the last remaining bank, which was unapologetic about servicing crypto firms and ran important fiat settlement infrastructure. The only problem? Based on what we know, it appears that Signature wasn't actually insolvent when they were nationalized and $4.3 billion of shareholder value was vaporized. Then Ellen continues. A second smoking gun was the denial of FDIC insurance to Custodia Bank, which had a 100% reserve business model that would have cost the FDIC nothing and posed no risk to the public. Custodia's goal was just to provide a secure on-ramp from dollars to cryptocurrencies and an off-ramp back again. In fact, Custodia didn't need to insure its deposits because it would not have been making loans from them. It would have kept them in reserve for the depositors. The bank needed FDIC insurance only because, without it, the Fed refused to give Custodia a master account necessary to participate in the national payment system. Caitlin Long, the Wall Street veteran who founded Custodia, argues that this newly imposed rule constitutes an unconstitutional violation of the long-standing right of states to charter their own banks. In an April 17th article titled, Why Defending the Right of States to Charter Banks Without Federal Permission is Critical, she writes, Until a decade ago, it was unheard of that a bank would stop serving entire groups of customers or the people in lawful, if controversial, industries. It was also unheard of that banks would be blocked from accessing either of the two federal utilities in the banking industry, 1, deposit insurance, and 2, the U.S. dollar payment system, which the FDIC and Fed operate respectively. Indeed, legislative history shows that Congress took great pains to keep the operation of these two utilities standalone and fully separated from the power to charter banks. As a check and balance, Congress wanted all chartering work done exclusively by the states or the lone federal agency that can charter banks, the OCC. Access to the two utilities was automatic for eligible banks, albeit with bank-specific insurance premiums and overdraft restrictions. Then Ellen continues, Custodia sued the Fed, and the Attorney General of Wyoming, the state chartering the bank, joined the lawsuit. The Attorney General noted in the filing that the Fed had created a Kafkaesque situation where a Wyoming chartered bank is denied access to the U.S. dollar payment system because it is not federally regulated, even while it's also denied federal regulation. And to end, I'll go back to the original question, what do we want in a presidential candidate? Matt's answer, which he said I had changed his mind on, was we want the truth. And that's also what Tonica of Visceral Adventures has said in her great article, Just Tell the Truth, Bobby. And another person who is saying that is CJ Hopkins. What he posted in his article on the Great Divide is, what I am trying to get at, Bobby, is that those of us who have refused to convert to the new reality, which I am guessing is approximately 25 to 30% of the global population, are not looking for a leader who can heal the divide. We are in a fight. We are fighting for reality. We are fighting for what's left of reality. And at the moment, we are getting our asses kicked. So fuck it. What have you got to lose? Throw out the playbook. Fire your PR people. Go for broke. Tell the truth. Tell folks what we're up against. That it isn't something an election is going to fix. That it isn't something a new president can fix. That it isn't fixable. That it is a fucking fight, and not one according to the Queensberry rules, a ball-kicking, eye-gouging, chair-swinging bar fight, and that sometimes, like now, when there is nowhere to run to, well, you have to stand and fight, even if you know you're going to lose. And to follow this up, as promised, here is the only deadly sin talking about the Hamsa, and this one is, what is the greater reset? And on the Substack version, it also has reinventing education. Thank you for watching.